Welcome to Design As, a show that's intended to speculate on the future of design from a range of different perspectives. This season, we're bringing you 6 new episodes with 6 new keywords to interrogate. In this episode, you'll be hearing 2 different design voices speak to the idea of design as visualization. I'm Lee Morell, host of the Futures Archive from Design Observer, founding director of Other Tomorrows, and professor of practice in design at Northeastern University's College of Arts, Media, and Design, which hosted the 2024 Design Research Society annual conference earlier this summer. There, I got the chance to sit down with various guests, leaders, and speakers who were attending the conference, and we've compiled their voices into this episode about design as visualization. It's a roundtable today in just 2 parts. On this episode, you'll hear from Dietmar Offenhuber.
We are used to talk about, design as a language. We are used to talk about data as a form of text. But beyond these textual metaphors, there's also a physical dimension that is often overlooked in the discourse, and that is very important.
And Paolo Ciucciarelli.
For controversial and societal problems, when you have data, but you want to make sure that multiple stakeholders can be part of the problem and the solution of the problems.
Visualization may be the most obvious thing to be talking about on a design podcast, but I think it's important to talk about it in this conversation because it actually takes different dimensions in the work that we do at different times. So in some cases, it's the process, just the sense of awareness and engagement in the world around you and the sort of perception of visual features or visual phenomena that take place. And our role as designer is to pick up on those things and to see them and understand them and document, perhaps retransmit them. In other cases, it's actually producing the content that's meant to be consumed. And it's that interplay between observation and perception and creation and bringing things to life to tell a story that's so powerful. And we hear a few different perspectives on this topic from this conversation, both understanding who's doing the seeing and who's doing the making, but also who's doing the act of putting that into the world and extending that out as something for other people to see. I'm here with Dietmar Offenhuber at Northeastern's recording studio. It's June 24th. Hi, Dietmar. How are you doing?
Hey, Lee. I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Well, Dietmar, in addition to directing traffic this morning, you're also the professor and chair of the Department of Art and Design here at Northeastern. You also have a secondary appointment in the School of Public Policy, and I don't know to what degree that's getting folded into this whole thing, but there's a lot going on. It's sort of buzzy.
Yeah, it's the way how Northeastern likes to do things, I would say.
And you have a panel discussion later this week.
So I have a book talk together with Catherine D'Ignacio on Thursday at lunch.
Okay.
And yeah, it's going to be amazing.
Okay.
We're going to talk about our books.
Tell us a little bit more about your book.
So my book is called Autographic Design with the subtitle The Matter of Data in a Self-Inscribing World. It sounds a little bit mysterious, but it's ultimately about the connection between design and information and our physical environment. Because in design theory, we often get carried away with very abstract systems, semiotic systems, science and language. We are used to talk about, design as a language. We are used to talk about data as a form of text. But beyond these textual metaphors, there's also a physical dimension that is often overlooked in the discourse, and that is very important. And when in this book, I talk about practices of trace making and presenting evidence through traces. What is the rhetorics around that? What are the practices and the methods? How do activists, citizen scientists, environmental advocates, and so on, how do they directly engage with the physical surroundings in order to visualize and present evidence and information?
And what would be an example of a project that would be included in your book?
One of the simplest examples, which is very, right now, almost like a global practice, which is started in New York as a practice of bicycle and pedestrian advocates around Clarence Eccleston, the street blocks, where these activists are constantly fighting for more space for cyclists and pedestrians and reclaiming space from, the motorized traffic. And of course, they run against transportation planners who are backed up by mathematical models of how much space you need on the street in order to, have a traffic circulation system. And rather than basically having the discourse through these mathematical models, they go out after a snowstorm and take photos of the vehicle traces. And they usually show that cars would need much less space if, everyone would drive as carefully as after a snowstorm. And the beautiful thing is that you have, even in very busy intersections, you have all these patches where you still have pristine white snow that hasn't been touched by anyone. You said, well, this could be a space for bicycles or for pedestrians or for a tree or something like that. And engaging directly with these physical traces instead of switching to this kind of level of expert language and expert models is, of course, also a strategy to move the center of the discourse away from those domains where those experts are in charge and define the way how information is collected and presented to a different, more sensory space where now suddenly the experts have to explain. So why can't we, do something here if, that space is obviously not needed.
So it's not so much about the kind of willful mark making as it is about recognizing and being comfortable and sensitive to the traces that life already produces as well.
Yeah, and I think that is a very important point to recognize. The very trace has many different stories and many different meanings. It's not that kind of, in the world of data, we have very unambiguous assignments, symbolic assignments of information. And then in visualization, we also use the same kind of formal methods to represent this. But traces don't represent anything. They just present themselves. And when you try to understand what's going on with traces around, you're always building a story. It's a kind of a different way of engaging. And it's, from that perspective, inherently relevant for visualization and for discourse around those issues.
You teach design. And the book like this is actually probably about documenting things that are already taking place, many of which are happening by non-designers.
Yeah.
So can you talk about the audience for the book and maybe how you would frame it for a designer versus somebody who does not have a design background?
Regardless of whether we talk about theory or, pretty much any kind of conceptual engagement with design, it always has to start with practices, what people are already doing. And today in your workshop, we had this discussion about AI and, the answer to that question 6 months ago or 3 months ago would have been very different because the impact on those practices were different and still evolving. And I think engaging with practices is very central. And one special thing that I did in this book maybe was that I used practical projects, art projects, exhibition projects, prototypes as a way of theorizing rather than as a way of presenting a final artifact. So, they were presented at festivals and so on and exhibitions, but they were kind of deliberately small scale because they were really more experimental situations for me to figure something out, to figure out how people respond to this. And this is something that is important in education, I think, as well, this kind of experimental approach that you go out and intervene, but you are doing it in a very reflective way. You're trying to figure out what's already there and which things you can change.
So when you finish a book project like this, I'm sure there's a kind of, obviously a sense of relief and maybe a decompression that takes place. But it gives you hopefully a moment to think about what's the future of design, sort of a reflective moment. Where's your head at right now when you look out to the future, both as a chair of a department, but also as a practitioner? What are you excited about or what's on your mind related to the future of design?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this case, my work as a department chair here is really challenging me because I see all these, what students are doing, what Northeastern is experimenting with. We have a lot of very, very interdisciplinary students, and they are sometimes struggling, sometimes really coming up with really very unique, perspectives and projects and ways of doing things. So for me, I feel very comfortable with design being at a research university. I have an art-related background, but I also really enjoy this connection to, because let's put it differently. A lot of people are talking right now about how most of the big issues that we're dealing with are, in a way, design problems, not necessarily that they can be addressed with a kind of rigorous, formulaic design process, but that they require some kind of practical engagement, they require some back and forth, that they involve trying things out, they involve reflection, and this just immersing yourself into a situation, into a messy situation, trying to figure it out, not with a script that you cannot change, but by just kind of engaging with it and taking it a step at a time. This is very much what design research is about. And from that perspective, I totally agree that, this is a methodology that is not limited to the design of furniture or posters.
And this sort of sea of ambiguity that we and students particularly are finding themselves in, that's a site of potential, right? I mean, There's so much that can happen in that space.
Yeah. So I was trained as an architect, and there you constantly have this struggle because, a building has so many facets. You have people who do the plumbing, people who do the ventilation, and they all have a different idea of what the perfect house should look like. And they all say, oh, the architect doesn't understand any of that. But the architect has to somehow synthesize all that conflicting information that cannot always be reconciled. And this is very much what generally happens in design. And this is why the studio and this experience is so important for our students, because they have to figure out how to deal with conflicting feedback, conflicting information, that when professor doesn't tell you, oh, you need to do this, you need to do this, then it's going to be better, and then come back with that. They give you some feedback that may be unexpected or, that you may disagree with, but you still have to figure out how to integrate it.
Right.
And I think that's the skill.
That's the magic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Dietmar, thank you so much for taking time with us.
Thank you, Lee.
This was wonderful, and I look forward to seeing you out at the conference.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lee.
Design As is a podcast from Design Observer. Did you know the Design Observer is taking pitches? Here's Editor-in-Chief Ellen McGirt.
At the end of the day and at the beginning of the day, Design Observer has always been about community. And as a community, we spend a lot of time thinking about the future, and very specifically about how the practice of design imagines a better world. And that's where everybody comes in, and that's where we need everybody. Over 20 years, the professional designers and journalists and experts in a variety of fields have been so generous with their points of view, contributing to stories, pitching stories. So we typically welcome three types of contributors. There are designers, the entire spectrum of what design can be, professional journalists who are focusing on business and design and education, justice and beyond, and book publishers and film festival producers. That's a big part of what we cover. Everything from opinion pieces and personal essays to conversations between designers in different disciplines, telling us more about how they work and how they collaborate and how they solve big problems. And I think, too, what I'm really excited about is the kinds of insights that younger and up-and-coming designers and thinkers are going to need to be able to navigate what's coming in this crazy world. So pitch us, please.
To get involved in the conversation, you can send pitches by going to designobserver.com and scrolling all the way down to the Pitch Us section. I'm here with Paolo Ciuccarelli at Northeastern's recording studio here. It's June 24th. You're an architect and a communication designer. You're also a professor here at Northeastern and the head of the Center for Design. Is that right?
Is it right?
And you have you were doing all kinds of impressive stuff, and you wrote a book as well before coming to Northeastern. So, between the professional work and the academic work, also in Milano, this is a culmination of many things, it feels.
Well, if you put it like that, I like it. That is sure. It's I've been in this field now for 25, close to 30 years, and crossing all different areas of design. So I started in product design when we built actually the design school in Politecnico di Milano, because I'm an architect, because design was not an option at the university level in Milano. So then when I graduated, I had the chance to be part of the group that set up the design school, and now it's one of the biggest in terms of students in the world. And then but we started with product design, and then we had some other courses, grad programs, and then eventually communication design became an option, and that's where I always wanted to be, and combining my two passions, technology and visual communication, visual languages. So I found my home there, and then this became my first real home, and then I moved eventually into information design and data visualization, that I claim to be my research area nowadays.
And you built a whole practice in that domain as well.
First of all, I founded a research lab that still exists in Politecnico di Milano in 2010, and it's called Density Design Research Lab, and it does research using design to transform data in many different ways, especially for controversial and societal problems. When you have data, but you want to make sure that multiple stakeholders can be part of the problem and the solution of the problem. So that's the focus of that research lab, and something that I brought here, I think, this experience. But here I also found a way at Northeastern, being in the College of Arts Media Design, together with architecture, music, theater, to expand a little bit the focus beyond data visualization, visual languages.
Okay.
And to reconnect in a way to my roots as an architect, and to start thinking about other modalities to transform data. For example, data sonification, something that started actually in between Polytechnic and here when I was moving. And so we created this data sonification archive that is probably the main resource now for anybody working in data sonification. And it gathered kind of a community around it, because it was in the middle of a transformation in the field. So people used data sonification in the past for scientific analysis, like astronomers always used data sonification. And on the other side, you had data artists that were using sound as a way to express data in an artistic way. But there was nothing in the middle, I would say. Same that happened with data visualization in a way. So design was able and is able now with data sonification to create a space where you can serve different purposes, and not just science and art. So there is a whole space in the middle that design can help populate with solutions that are intentionally designed to serve a certain customer, a certain user, a certain purpose within a certain context.
And how many pieces are in this, or materials are in this archive? How large is it?
More than 400 cases.
Okay.
We collect projects, and we have curate that, and we have all the set of metadata is available, if you want to do some analysis. And there are a number of papers that came out as an analysis of certain areas of this website, like, all the astronomy cases have been analyzed, and there is a paper published on Nature Astronomy about that. And so it enables also as a knowledge base, other people to do some research on that. Yeah.
This is an expansion of the way that we've traditionally understood what data does. Data is just like dumb stuff that piles up somewhere, and you're bringing it to life through all these various tools and creating a forum through which we can analyze this.
Yeah. The point is, analysis is one of the purposes, and is probably not the most interesting for us, because on one side there are already a lot of different solutions that exist and are very powerful if you want to do analysis with data. What is more interesting is that when you go out of analysis and you have other purposes, so you want to communicate with data, you want to explain something to the data, or you want to brings some scientific evidence to non-expert, for example, to the public, engage the public with something that is happening, and COVID, for example. That's when analytical tools or analytical methods to visualize data don't really help. And you have to figure out other ways to transform data so that they make sense for these other stakeholders, these other users, and these other purposes. So that's where we, I think, have a role as designers.
Can you describe the role of the Center for Design in sort of pedagogical terms? Like how you're bringing that into the curriculum for teaching in a way that can engage both students, but also the faculty that are doing research projects. So it feels like a sort of expansion of the role that the College of Arts and Media Design had previously.
Well, the Center for Design has been conceived most as a research center. So originally, actually, there was no intention, I would say, no plan to really connect with the curriculum, the curricular activity. But then eventually what we discovered is that a lot of students actually are interested, and of course faculty as well, sometimes in doing research. So the role that now is playing is acting as a kind of an interface between the research activities that is, of course, important. Like, we are in R1 research university, and students will love engaging with that kind of solving problems, and the research scale is different than, the studio courses that you have. So I think now the center, we embrace that need that we saw emerging, and then we are now trying to facilitate as much as possible this connection. So we connect to the curriculum in a way that can help students navigate through the research activity to have connected this connection, connecting this emerging need or will that we saw with the research that is happening at the center and beyond. So that's, I think, the way we are now plugging into the curriculum. And now we will launch another news next year in the fall, what we call student residencies. So if you're a student and you have an idea for a research project and that goes beyond what are your duties in the curriculum, you can apply for the fellowship. And so at residency, you can stay at the center, you have your own seat, a table, and then you can get some mentorship and you can develop your project, your research project, with the help of the center and with a little money that you can use for buying materials or software, whatever you need. So this is something that will, again, facilitate the connection between students and research. So,
kind of exciting stuff. As we think about the future, right, we're looking out. When you're looking out, when you kind of take stock of where things are going, what are you excited about or even concerned about when we think about design in the future?
Yeah, of course, I have both concerns and excitement. Excitement comes mainly from realizing that something that I'm dealing with, in a sense, I think a lot of years as a concept. It's a concept that actually informed, in a way, my professional career in design research and design also education. That is this idea of meta design. It's something that has origins in architecture, some connections with Italy. It's something that I always loved as an idea. Now what I see is that it's becoming particularly relevant with the emerging technologies that are changing the way we design. So now more than ever, the idea of designers becoming meta designers, or this idea of designing on a different level, I think it's becoming and will become more and more important. Meta design essentially is like that you don't design the actual thing. So like you don't do that specific project, but you design, let's say, the rules and the protocols to enable other designers to design with these other designers being human or not human. So meaning that the moment we have an algorithm that designs, then how this algorithm design should be designed, in my opinion, by a designer that does meta design. So that defines the rules and the constraints within which the algorithm or the designers will perform the activity.
That's complex, but I'm with you. Yes, okay.
Trust me. Okay. Now that's, I think it's designing, the relationship between part of processes or things.
Okay.
And that's something that, has the roots in the 60s, actually, in architecture, where someone started to think about buildings, for example, as a relationship between spaces. And so they started to design those relationships as a think about the diagram that connects these spaces, these blocks in a certain way, and then this diagram can be applied case by case and interpreted by the designer, the actual designer, in that moment, in that context, in that place, in a certain way. So this diagram will generate and produce a number of different design iterations that are informed by the diagram, but that capture the local conditions and express that diagram, that meta design in a specific way. But if you look at the results, you should be able to recognize this relationship on the back. Something that I try to apply also to branding. It seems a little far, but I think it's the same with branding. So you design, some rules and core values, and then depending on the situation and the context, then you iterate and you create this specific expression of this. So it's like the genetic, components that then you put in action, so that you have to recognize that all the entities are part of the same family. So you recognize the genomic commonalities, but then it's every time different but similar in a way.
And so the more that we can increase in complexity, but then also we can multiply or iterate at an exponential rate, we require ways of thinking and conceiving of design, which is actually not so much material, but
definitely
contextual. Okay.
And it has to do with complexity, systemic thinking, and systems design. It's about embracing complexity and start designing at that level.
Okay. That's heady stuff. But that is where we're going,
excitement.
and maybe where we are right now. Right.
I think we need to be, because we need to drive and orient the way things are designing. So not just designers, but also algorithms are designing. So we need to be able to govern that system, and I think the only way is to make that leap and embrace what I call meta design.
Okay, both exciting and scary, right?
And then the concern is kind of connected, of course, because it's new in a way. So there is a lot of uncertainty, so that brings a lot of panic sometimes, and also these concerns that come with the emerging technology themselves. So biases, ethical problems. That's something that we have to face now, and it's challenging.
Paolo, thank you so much for your time. It's been a super busy week, but thanks for making the time to talk to us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again to Dietmar Offenhuber and Paolo Ciccarelli for taking the time to sit down with me. Design As is a podcast from Design Observer. For a transcript and show notes, you can visit our website at designobserver.com/designaz. You can always find Design As on any podcatcher of your choice. And if you like this episode, please let us know. Write us a review, share it with a friend, and keep up with us on social media at Design Observer. Special thanks to Maxine Philivong at the Northeastern Recording Studio and Design Observer's editor-in-chief, Ellen McGirt. This episode was mixed by Judy Bell Kamanian. Design As is produced by Adina Karp.